Hi everyone, and welcome to LSBF TV for AAT students. For those of you watching for the first time, I'll introduce myself. My name is Gareth Thomas and I am the course manager for AAT at LSBF. And today I'd like to continue covering the advanced level synoptic assessment to cover the last task for section 1 for the ethics part of the synoptic assessment. Now, those of you that have been watching so far will have already been familiar with how to approach questions 1 and 2. And you'll also know that the synoptic assessment is spread at level 3 over 2 sections, section 1 and section 2. So we'll continue today with section 1 and in fact we'll complete section 1. So welcome to everyone on Friday afternoon. Now, as usual, what I'd like to do is to try and explain to you where the examiner is actually getting the questions from for the synoptic assessment. And when we covered question 1, we actually looked at the learning outcomes and how the questions were actually drawn in and what they were composed of, and then what you'd be able to sort of see and expect when you do this sort of question. We did exactly the same for question 2. And we will continue that with question 3 today. But just a reminder everyone, the synoptic assessment is a mixture of units that you are covering at level 3 with the exception of indirect tax. And the other thing to remember, the important thing, is that ethics is going to be contained in section 1, and as it is not examined anywhere else, we can expect to have an ethics theme running through this part of the synoptic. Okay, so let's firstly have a look at the objectives and really what we're going to cover for this question. So part 3, assessment objective 3, what are we looking at? And what more importantly, is the examiner looking at? And what we're trying to do here is to apply ethical and accounting principles when preparing final accounts for different types of organisation, develop ethical courses of action, and communicate relevant information effectively. So this is the overall assessment objective that is being covered here. There are 15 marks for this question, and the first section, i.e. it's question 3, the 15 marks are each 45 marks. So this is 15 marks. Now, the related learning objectives, where is this coming from? Well, the first thing to look at is it's coming from ethics for accountants. So you can expect something in there from ethics, surprise, surprise. And it's learning outcome 3, which is to recognise how to act ethically in an accounting role. So you're very likely to see some sort of scenario whereas you are the assistant accountant and you've been asked to do something. Then you have to decide how to act ethically. So that is the first part. Also, the examiner is going to take assessment objective 3 and he's going to look at units from financial accounts preparation. So the examiner is going to draw in questions from financial accounts preparation, which you will have covered already. And what we are looking at here are learning outcomes 1 to 6. So everything really that you've covered for financial accounts preparation could be examined within this particular question. Now that's quite useful information here because you know there are 15 marks and this is what you have to concentrate on. So let's just do a quick recap really of what is covered under this particular section of your syllabus. And we're looking at distinguishing between financial recording and reporting requirements of different types of organisation. So you'll need to know and be fully competent and comfy with that aspect. We'll explain the need for final accounts and the accounting and ethical principles underlying their preparation. You'll also need to be familiar with preparing accounting records from incomplete information. And this category of learning outcomes you will have gone into depth on already within your studies. Learning outcome 4, to be able to produce accounts for sole traders. So this could also creep into this particular unit. 5, accounts for partnerships. And 6, you need to be able to recognise The key differences between preparing accounts for a limited company and a sole trader. Now, if this does come up within this sort of question, it could be written or it could be numerical. So you need to be confident and you need to practice both types of question, which is what we'll go on to do today. Now, before we go any further, as always, we'll have a look at an extract from the examiner's report and just get an overall comment on what the examiner thinks has happened to date with the answers generically that are coming through. Examiner's comments on task 3. And this is taken from the examiner's report. So, in relation to ethical behaviour, some students struggle to identify principles and threats. Students sometimes suggest actions that are too extreme. Now, what I think the examiner means there is if there is a pull-down box that you can click and one of the options is to resign, that is what we would determine as an extreme course of action. So look carefully before you go to that final course of action. That would be or warrant what we would call maybe extreme. So this is what we're looking at. And also interesting here is within this ethics section of the exam, you can access pop-down information sections within your exam. So you can actually click on sections of the ethical code of practice. So really, if you're familiar with this and you do think, I can't quite remember, then what you do, click, pull that down and have a look. So you need to know where to find it, first of all, and not to waste time in the exam. Okay, everyone. Hopefully we're happy with where the question is going to come from. Now, what I'd like to do then is to start off with the question, which is task 3, and we'll work our way through this together. This task, as expected, is on a work-based scenario of BLM, and the date is the 28th of February, which is the material. Brian has asked you to prepare some financial statements urgently. These include a statement of cash flows and a cash budget. He needs to send these to the bank by the end of the week, so there's a deadline on this, as part of a loan application. So he's saying why. Brian tells you that obtaining the loan is very important for the survival of the business. That's crucial. Okay. The jobs of everyone depend on this. Another critical sentence there. So everyone's jobs are at stake. You've not yet studied cash flows or cash budgets. Problem. You've been asked to do something that you haven't yet studied. Describe 2 threats to your ethical principles as a result of Brian's request. So from that paragraph, you should be able to identify 2 threats. Now again, if you remember the threats, brilliant. You can write them on some rough paper yourselves, and then you can import the answers if you like. If not, you can get to the drop-down menu and see exactly what you've got in there that you can comment on. So what type of threats are we looking at? There are 5 basic threats. Number 1 is self-interest. So that would be one threat that you could identify. That's a possibility. Number 2, you could be looking at self-review. Number 3, you've got familiarity. And all these are available. Leave that. Number 4, intimidation. And number 5, I'm writing the full amount of threats in here, and we'll underline the ones that we'll get to put into the answer. And number 5 would be advocacy. So from those threats, you need to identify which 2 threats to ethical principles. Now there may be 2 available, more than 2 available, which means that of those there could be 3 that are applicable. So of the three, you might want to choose two. So let's have a look. Is there self-interest at stake here? That's the first one. And this is where you need to go back to the scenario. So let's go back to the question. Brian tells you that obtaining the loan is very important for the survival of the business. The jobs of everyone. Now, everyone, as you're in the position here, your job is at risk. So self-interest, we would say, yes, there is a self-interest. So that would be one. Very, jump straight out. Self-review. Well, this particular aspect of the ethical threats is where you review your own work and come up with something. So that is not part of this scenario. Familiarity. I would say yes, because your boss you're familiar with, and you've been asked to do something that really crosses the line here. So it could be that. Intimidation. I would say, again, yes for this one, because everyone's job is at stake. The future of the business depends on it. It is the survival of the business. So indirectly, you've been asked to do something here that really to slant towards the business. So that would be yes. Advocacy, which really is speaking up on behalf of others, even in the public domain, I would say no. So you've got a choice here with three of those, and you need to pick two. So that's the first thing. So choose either of those. And I would go here for probably self-interest as a favourite and intimidation. So these are the ones I would pick out. What else do we need to do? So we're going to describe the threats. So self-interest, really, basically, that is the description is because it is securing jobs. So securing own job. So that is how self-interest appears. And intimidation is you feel under threat, really. And basically, that threat forms part of loyalty to your colleagues. So you could bring in there loyalty to staff. And I think that satisfies the answer. You will come up with answers of your own. However, that largely satisfies it, and that will get you the marks. Okay? So, number 2, what response should you give to Brian in order to remain ethical? So what would you do in this situation? Now, this is where we don't want the extreme to come out. Okay? So, response to Brian, you should. You've not yet been trained on this. So you could, 1, agree with additional training. I think that's fair enough, everyone. Then you become competent. So that's good. So it'll be the first course of action. Or really, you're faced with only one other choice, is asking, can someone else take that particular job off you who's got more experience and more skills in this particular part of the job role? So ask for help or reallocate. And again, sensible approach, and I think everyone would come up with that. And the reason for that, I think we just said the reason actually before we decided on what we would ask to do. So the reason for that would be, really, I wouldn't say it's professional competence as yet, because you can't say that you're not competent. You may well do a very good job. But I think the best thing would be, the reason would be, let's say 1, a lack of experience in this particular area. Lack of experience. And if anything, that would be professional, that would be the ethical. Competence. And I think that would be enough to cover the marks for that particular answer there. So, I mean, not difficult. The ethics jumps out, but you need to read the question and refer back to the question. So, why is an accountant would you have a professional duty to uphold sustainability in your workplace? Well, do you at all? Sustainability. If you recall sustainability, I think there were the 3 P's, okay, which you're looking at: profit, people, and planet. You don't need to put that in this answer, by the way. That's just to flag up what sustainability is. That is a quick way, really, of remembering it. And if you're an accountant, do you have a professional duty to uphold sustainability in your work? Well, I think you do, because you are acting in the public interest. So, yes, you do, because you need to act in public interest. So, answer complete, or the first part of the answer. There's another larger section coming up, but that mainly covers what we're looking at for part 1, and that's all actually all drawn from the ethical section, and asking for courses of action that you would take. So take a common sense approach, look at the scenario, call up the threats from the pop downs if you need to, and then you can insert your answer. Right, let's move on. Hopefully everyone's happy with that. Now, there's an email that you've received from Lakmani Moore, and it's the date is 20th of the 2nd, change in structure. So that is the subject, as we call it, and inevitably you will be asked to do something on the train on a change in structure. Good morning, Sam. Brian and I are considering operating the business as a limited company. I just underline these things for my own use as I go along, and really for illustration. I would like you to tell me more about the implications of a partnership becoming a limited company. So it does look as if there's going to be a change from a partnership over to a limited company, or really a potential change, depending on what information you actually come up with here. So the 3 things that you need to include here: we need to include a brief description of a limited company, a summary of our position as owners if the business becomes a limited company, and explanations of one key advantage and one disadvantage of operating as a limited company. So this part of the question, as the learning outcomes quite rightly showed us at the start, is being drawn from the final accounts prep unit that you've covered already. And it's going to be in the form of an email where you need to address all the points below. So you'll be given a blank email and asked to read, to populate this email as you go along. So who's it to, first of all? And that's the first thing. So it's from Lakmani Moore, so it's going to be to Lakmani Moore. That's the first thing. Now we need to come up with a subject. In other words, we need to come up with a heading, really, so people just don't discard the email or whatever you're putting together. So it's going to be limited company. You don't need to abbreviate. I'll abbreviate. Structure. Anything along the line. I'll even put conversion if you like. So basically, straight away, when this email arrives, you know who it's from and what it's all about, so you can click straight on that. It's common sense. And the date is the 28th of the 2nd, and you would open up your email with, normally, I suppose, it's hi, or hello, hi. So that's what you'd start off with. And then I think I would open it up with a very brief introduction. You know, thank you for your email. So there'll be a brief intro. You know, thank you. for email, full stop. And really, please consider the following, or please be advised of the following. So please be advised of the following. I was running, thinking before I'm writing. Please be advised of the following. And what you're then going to do is to start to put things together in the form of an email. So let's have a look. The first thing is, what is a limited company? So, okay, a limited company, okay, has a separate legal identity, and that's probably the most important point and the first point to raise. So when you're telling someone this has a separate legal entity. So that's an important category between a limited company and a partnership. That is a big difference, and that's a brief summary. So we're saying that. What else do we know about limited companies? Well, 2, the company has to be registered at Companies House. Has to be registered. At Companies House. 3, accounts have to be filed here. So there's 3 differences already with filing requirements, registration, and it's a separate legal entity. So let's scan back up and see what else. I'm constantly going to try and refer to the question here. What about the position of owners as the business becomes limited? Now this is an important sort of distinction between a limited company and a sole trader or a partnership. So the owners, who currently are the partners, the owners of a limited company are now called, they're called shareholders. So very big distinction here. Now that's fine if the partners are going to be the only shareholders, then they're still the owners, you know, in effect. However, if you're taking on more shareholders, which you can do, then the partner's ownership is probably diluted. So, I'm going to just elaborate and say, okay, if partners own all the shares. Okay, so that covers that bit. So that's the owners there. Now the people that work within the company, therefore, okay, the partners or whoever else, they've normally appointed a board. So I'm just listing points, guys. Board of directors runs the company. So that's another big difference. And the board are elected at annual general meetings every year. So that happens there. So it's a board of directors. 6, I think, is the form of payments, really. I think that's really important. So the shareholders, they are paid in dividends, whereas previously the owners, they got partnership salaries and probably appropriation of profits. So there's a slightly different way in how things are paid out of companies. So the shareholders they get dividends and the directors get salaries. So another big difference in how they're paid. You might not get all the points, you might get different points. They're all, you get marks for all of them. What else are we looking at for this particular question? What's one advantage and one disadvantage? Well, let's have a look. One advantage, and I'm going to list this. Advantage. One, limited liability. In other words, if the company goes into liquidation or there is a loss, then the liability is limited to the amount of shareholders' funds. That's what limited liability. It's a big advantage, whereas with a sole trader or a partnership, then they are totally liable. And a disadvantage there are a lot more rules and regulations. So more rules and regulations. We have something called Companies Acts that a limited company must follow. So there's Company Acts which come into application. And I think really that gives quite a comprehensive answer there, which hopefully will pick you up most of the marks, of which there are 10. So, question covered. Thanks very much for watching. Hope to see you all next week. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Thank you. That, guys, concludes the third question from part 1 of the Advanced Synoptic Assessment, and gives us 45 marks hopefully, and hopefully gives us a good approach of what is expected and how you will now become more confident. Next week we're going to look at something on spreadsheets. So we'll be going into section 2 of the Synoptic Assessment, and someone called Natalia Faraday will be introducing herself to talk you through the spreadsheet element of the advanced level synoptic assessment. Now, I hope you've enjoyed everything so far, and I hope you will look forward to joining us again next week for the spreadsheet section of this section. So, thank you very much. Bye.